Welcome to On the Brink with Andi Simon. Today we have a very special On the Brink podcast. I have two gentlemen with us who are going to help us really dig deep into how podcasting has emerged, surged, and where it's going next. And so I want to tell you a little bit about why it's so important for you to listen in or watch, because this is a time of great transformation in our communications. Now, I'm a podcaster. Chad Parizman is a great podcaster. He's got a great podcast company called The Podcast Consultant. He's been in marketing for a long time. And Mark Schaefer, you can listen to some of his podcasts on the Brink. And he and I have had a great time talking about the future of marketing and where podcasting comes from, where it goes to, and why it's ready for perhaps a rethinking. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure meeting with you and talking to you. And I think we are ready to drop right in and begin our conversation. The reason for today is that the times they are changing and they're fast changing. And when speed is really moving things along, humans hate it. The brain hates change. But now it's an opportunity for us to rethink what's going on and how we can go about it in a great way. There are 4.2 million podcasts globally and 109 million people in the US. Many of those podcasts are inactive, but that's fine. It's easy to get into, but there's something here that's really going on. I'm going to start with Chad. Introduce yourself a little bit. Who's Chad? And how did you get into podcast consulting? And what do you see happening?
Sure. So thanks so much for having me. I am Chad Parizman, and I got into podcast creation consulting kind of maybe a little bit backwards from the way that a lot of folks did it. I was actually working at Pfizer. So I ran digital communications at Pfizer for a number of years. And while I was there, we were trying to get a podcast resource off the ground out of my team. We were pitching it. We were talking about it with a lot of internal stakeholders. And then back in 2019, it started to take off. I was doing a lot of development inside of the company. We were launching external podcasts. And then during COVID, we actually had a lot of interest. Everyone went home and we were looking for ways to distribute information in a different way. And so the idea of internal podcasting became very popular. And basically what happened was I got a side gig as part of my main gig, which was during the day, I was still running the team, but at night we were recording and producing and editing and shipping podcasts internally. And so along with kind of being a producer, I learned editing and I learned about all the tools for remote recording and making your sound better. And then when I left Pfizer after, kind of largely the pandemic was deemed over, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and very quickly had people call me up saying, "Hey, you did that over there. Can you come do that for my brand? Can you come do that for my company?" And I did. That was not my goal, but very quickly found out that there was a need, and we can talk about it a little bit more. But I really saw podcasting where social media was maybe about a decade before, where lots of brands wanted to do it. They weren't doing it really well in-house, and they really needed some guidance to understand the landscape, the tools, the technology. And so for the last, almost 4 years now, I've been working with some fantastic brands and helping them get off the ground, helping them retool, and helping them think about how podcasting really fits in with their other
Right.
communications and marketing strategies. Yeah, yeah.
But this is storytelling at its best. It's a new medium, but in fact, it's taking what you did so well and expand it. We'll talk in a minute about the lessons you've learned and how to help other people as they think about it. But Mark, how did you get into this? Other than you're a guru in marketing, and it seemed to be maybe a natural fit. But please share your story.
Well, it was a measured decision for me actually because I believe very strongly that to stand out in the world, you've got to be great. You can't be in a dozen different places. You have to find a channel and really master it. And for me, that channel was blogging. I am a natural writer. I enjoy writing, and but I was curious about podcasting, and I'm a teacher. I'm a consultant. And so I felt like I really needed to learn how to do it to be a better teacher. And so I wanted to do it in a way that really wouldn't interrupt my blogging or, take too much time away from my blogging. So I came up with this idea that other than most people that do a podcast every week, I would do mine every other week. And part of the reason was because if I did it every week, it'd be too much work. And you've got to have joy. You've got to have enthusiasm, or the audience can tell. So it was important for me to create this in a way that would be joyful. So I had one co-host, and we had a good chemistry, a good friendship, a good sort of intellectual bond that created great discussions. And so we did it every other week for about 6 years. And then his job changed where he wasn't really doing marketing anymore. So I kind of had to reinvent myself. And today I'm in my 13th year, and I have six rotating co-hosts on my show, and to kind of give me the opportunity to paint on a bigger canvas rather than just talk to one person. But it still creates, it creates the show every other week in a way that brings joy to me, that isn't too time consuming. And now it's just something I look forward to. I think it's
Yeah.
really helped build the brand a lot. And I wanted to build on something that Chad said about why now, why podcasting is growing so much now, and why I started in blogging. So in the early days of the internet, blogging was really all you had. We didn't have the bandwidth. We didn't have the technology to effectively create video or even podcasts. It would take forever to upload these things. So blogging was sort of the entry content, and then video came along, and podcasting came along a little later. And the reason why it's exploding is because it's still an underserved need, right? So people learn in different ways. They learn by reading, or by listening, or by viewing, maybe even by doing, which is where the metaverse might come in, and augmented reality. So podcasting is behind. And one statistic that I sort of think is amazing is Edison Research does this study every year, and this year they showed that the person, the average podcast listener, listens to 9 podcasts a week. 2 years ago, it was 5.
Yep.
So I mean, that's just incredible, and it just shows that there's still an underserved need out there, I think, for podcasting.
Yeah, the word underserved is an interesting word because, to some degree, the podcaster, so our podcast emerged out of my first book. And my PR woman said, "You need a podcast." And I went, "Okay." So I went on a couple of podcasts and I went, "Those are terrible. There must be a better way of doing it." So the catalyst was, can you tell? This is storytelling. I'm an anthropologist and I love to tell stories that make things come alive for people. So the title On the Brink with Andi Simon came off the book On the Brink, Fresh Lens to Take Your Business to New Heights. And brand building was part of the objective. It's brought my clients across the globe. But the other part was that I learned that I love to interview people and have conversations. And what better way to find interesting people than through now a podcast? Now, the interesting part for me is that it's selfish, or it's selfless. I can't tell which it is. Am I doing something for others or for myself, or is it okay to do both? But it's an interesting time because the question I have is I've fallen into a habit and the routines are pretty much the same. The folks who I bring on are similar. And am I ready to think about it in a new fashion? So I'm anxious to hear about the lessons that you have each learned, and I'll share some of those that I'm beginning to observe because I actually went back to look at past podcasts to say, what do I like, what I've done, and what would I have done differently, and what's coming out in the new community that's beginning to build. So, Chad, I'll go back to you. Lessons you've learned, things you're seeing, ways as a consultant, consult with us and for the audience about, what's hot, what's not, and what we should move from to.
Yeah, I mean, so many things, and I think Mark really exemplified this, right? I think a lot of people have the idea of like what a podcast is, right? And that's probably based off of whatever your favorite podcast or one of the 8 podcasts that you're listening to in the week, and right, whether that's Smartless or whether that's Joe Rogan, right, where it's like, oh, I have to do it every week. It has to be a conversation show. And the reality is and when I talk with folks out there in brands, like podcasting is not just one thing anymore. And so I think expanding that where it can be a solo show, it can be, hey, once a month, it is getting a round table, but after that, maybe it is more documentary style, well researched. Maybe we only do seasonals, right? And we record 10 episodes and we release them in the spring and the fall, right? So I think that's the first thing that I go to is don't put your podcast in a box. Podcasting is about the delivery mechanism. It's how people consume it. It's audio. It's increasingly becoming video. But there's some parameters that I think we can all kind of agree on. You know a podcast when you see it. But beyond that, there's lots of room for new ways to explore the medium. And so, that's the first thing I think of. And then, the second thing is I look on the technology side. And again, a lot of people go to, what kind of microphone? What's the software that I need? And there's so many things out there that's not the stuff to be worrying about, right? And it should be about what makes this compelling, right? So why do it in a podcasting format? To Mark's point, you could be writing blog posts. You could be doing incredibly produced videos. You could go out and make a documentary and hope to go win awards, right? There's lots of ways for brands and for individuals to get their name out there. What is unique about podcasting? Why do you think that this medium is the way to tell your story and effectively communicate? And then let's work back from there. If this is about driving sales, or to your point, if you're an author, absolutely, right? Number one way every publishing company right now is, how many podcasts can we get you on? You should be launching a podcast. And that's to get book sales, right? And we can talk about maybe how effective that has been. Is that still effective? But when I talk with brands, it's okay, what is the thing that this ladders back up to? How is it going to meet whatever your business need is? And let's make sure that those two things are in sync, because microphones are not the number one thing we need to be worrying about podcasting, right? There's lots of ways to get it from the recording all the way out to how someone consumes the content.
Stay on that for one more moment, and then I'll refer to Mark and his thoughts. Because I was on one podcast, I was on 10 podcasts last year. And one of the women said, "This is my last podcast." And I said, "Then why am I on it?" It was one of those, what's the point? And it was demoralizing for me. I couldn't rise to the occasion, I'm sure. But on the other hand, I had to ask myself, why are you doing this? And that becomes your point. Why are we doing this? And don't go do it unless you have passion and purpose, because if not, it's a lot of work. But it's also, it just occupies space. There's no point to it at all. Mark, your thoughts, lessons learned.
Yeah, well, a couple of things, just based on your great story there, is one time I got to interview the great author Tom Peters, and he was retiring. He wrote his last book. He was retiring, and then 2 years later, he had a new book out, and I was interviewing him again, and I said, what's the deal? You told me you were retired. He said, I'm desperate to get my ideas out. And
Ah,
he said, in fact, that's what makes the greatest speaker, the greatest author, the greatest podcast. If people just have something's burning inside of them that they just want to, tell the world or help the world or get their ideas out. And certainly that's the way it is for me. I mean, I have a lot of ideas. I'm passionate about a lot of things when it comes to marketing, and I feel like most people haven't listened to me yet. Well, I want to keep going. The other thing is, listening to you, and as you're thinking about, well, what's next? I think one of the key ideas about an effective podcast is relevance, because there is a lot of competition out there. And relevance for me is sort of matching your skills, your passion, the thing that's burning in your heart with what's going on in the world. How do I serve them right now? And the image I use a lot of my talks is a surfer. So like what you're good at, your core competency, what you sort of build your personal brand on, that's like your surfboard. That's not gonna, I mean, you're gonna keep learning and you're gonna keep evolving, but you're not gonna change your surfboard. That's what brought you here. To be relevant, you don't need a new surfboard, you need a new wave. So what's going on in the world
Yep.
that, what's the wave you need to catch to be newly relevant? So that's sort of the idea I have around, how my content has evolved to sort of say, well, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I'm good at. How do I serve the world now? How do I serve the world now? How can I be newly relevant in my show?
But you said a couple of things. You know, you're a teacher, and I was a professor, and I do a lot of workshops and speaking. And I like to share ideas, but I also like to get other people engaged in the sharing of the ideas so it becomes their ideas. So it's an interesting time. The medium here is sort of fascinating. To some degree, this podcast developed because I saw how many people Donald Trump reached through podcasts that his college-age son had urged him to do. And of course, he had 4 years to do it. But Kamala had, a tenth of that, and didn't go on Joe Rogan. And so you have sort of this kind of moment where you're saying, speaking to whom and how do I do it and how do I use the medium for a purpose? Now you could say it for brand building, you can do it for resource sharing, whatever you might like. And then I asked my granddaughter, who's 15, do you listen to podcasts? Oh yeah, Grandma, I just love the ones on cold cases where they're trying to figure out. And I said, you're listening to ones on cold cases. Now, who would have thought? But that's my future. And I said, yeah, I'm so curious. I want to know how they do it. And the mystery is so on that note, I go back to you guys. So what is the relevance for the future? I'm going to start with Mark on this one and then come to you, Chad, because, in some ways, Mark, you always open up this can of ideas. And to some degree, I share with you the desire to be both relevant and to know what my listeners would like to know more about so they can get off the brink. Your thoughts. What do you see coming in terms of relevance for you, perhaps, or for others?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is something that Chad and I have actually talked quite a bit about, um, and that the thing that makes me enthused about podcasting is that I think it is the last bastion of truly human, authentic, trusted content, right? And it kind of goes hand in hand with your personal brand, right? Because we live in this world where there's so much disinformation. And I've said that the number one question on all of our customers' minds from now on is it real?
Mhm.
Right? When I go look at Instagram or YouTube, I mean, I have no idea what is even real anymore. When I look at these videos or look at these images. But a podcast, it's like a human being. And like Chad said, you can't really fake it, right? It's human, it's authentic, it's trustworthy, and I think that's really important from two different perspectives. Number one, for building your own brand and creating this, authentic human message. Podcasting is a great medium, but also as an advertiser, this is one of the last places left where there's corporate ads on podcasts, and these ads are being presented by the person that you trust most, the host of the podcast. So I think, both as a medium and also as an advertising channel, podcasting still holds, I think, a unique place in the world.
If managed well, that is very true. Chad, how about your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you're just trying. I mean, I think what Mark said was, I'd absolutely agree with. And so, maybe just to build on that, I think actually the technology that we're having, mostly right in the AI space and some of these other tools, are going to. It's funny to think about. I think the technology will actually empower people to be more real, right? If that kind of makes sense, because if I don't have to worry about, hey, does my microphone placement right? If I can use a tool that just makes me sound better than I am today, and then I can use another tool that helps me put together my show notes, and another tool to help me research guests, right? People that maybe I've never even thought about, and I can use, right? There's a lot of these things as you start to stack it up. What that lets you do is that it frees up your brain from having to worry about all the little minutia to worrying about going back to what is great content. Hey, I can finally get Mark Schaefer on my podcast. How do I think about making that the best conversation I can have? Hey, maybe because I've done 50 episodes, I can, I'm not worried about trying to go and get Mark Cuban. Maybe I'm not worried about trying to go and get, asking Kamala, or asking, my state governor who's going to be running, who's got a primary next year, whatever it is. I think by being able to build up that trust because of being able to leverage all this technology, it lets us free ourselves to focus back on the content, the conversation. We're having this great talk right now. You had an idea of what we were going to talk about, but we could throw a curveball your way, and we're going to be free to have the conversation go someplace totally different. There's very few other formats that let you do that besides podcasting.
My hope is like other things where we've had lots. We had lots of cars being made, and now we have few. And you can choose among them, but it's not like we had lots of bicycle dealers, and then it shrunk down to a few. I'm a horse person. We had lots of folks who were raising horses, and now we have a few. My hope, to your point, though, is that if the podcast hosts can understand the role they're playing in building authenticity and communicating reality and owning a space that others can learn from or enjoy, or however you want to define it, then it doesn't have to shrink into, 5 corporate ones and 3 others. I don't care whether it's, 4.2 million or a million, but the idea is that people can come and share honest thoughts and bring others there to expand your wisdom and begin to think about different models within this technology that allows you to do it. And it's not expensive. You don't need corporate underwriting. If you want to make money, I ought to go for it. But I almost like not monetizing it. And Mark, I'm watching your face. What are you thinking about, dear Mark?
My face is so transparent. I just can't help it.
No, but I love
You
your
could
face.
you could tell when the wheels are turning.
They are.
Uh, well, a couple of things. First of all, this idea of being afraid because the world is seemingly so saturated. Can you really build an audience? And I think the idea is that media is very fragmented. I don't think it's going to consolidate into big mega things. There is some of that going on, but I think there's still room because if you think about how content is consumed today, everybody's not sitting around a television at 6 o'clock at night to see, the NBC News.
Unless you're 65 and older.
Yeah,
And then
yeah, right.
right.
But we've got our earbuds in, and we're consuming our favorite music and our favorite podcasts and our favorite audiobooks. It doesn't really matter what the mass media is. It's our media. We're our own media channel. And I think if someone concentrates on, look, I might not be top of mind. I might not be Joe Rogan, but what if I'm top of heart? The audience that really matters to me, they love me. They care about me. And is that an audience big enough, to help me make my dreams come true, whatever that might be? I think that's a better way to look at it rather than trying to be afraid of the numbers and try to like grow the numbers and have some dominance. But are you creating an audience that matters where you're top of heart, maybe not just top of mind? And what I mean by that, if I said to someone, name a soft drink, they'd probably say Coca-Cola. And I'd say, what's your favorite soft drink? I'd say Fresca, which is a delightful drink, by the way. And so, I mean, Fresca isn't top of mind, but it's top of heart, and
Yes.
that's where the business is, right? I buy Fresca. I don't buy Coke.
So
And
I
so
should, but
I,
good, Jen. Go ahead.
I was just going to build on that. I would actually argue, I think podcasts are becoming mass media, though, right? And we're
Some
seeing,
places, yeah.
yeah, regularly, again, going back to the most recent election, we know that there are podcasts out there being consumed at a higher rate than cable news, than nightly news, right? And so I think there's a lot of things where individuals are leaving mass media companies to basically stand up their own solo media, and we've seen all kinds of
Yep.
examples, right? The guys from Reply All, they left that. They left Gimlet Media, which is bought by Spotify. They now have their own podcasts that are basically supported majoritarily by subscriptions. And I think this goes back to, Mark, if you can be top of heart, I actually think you can be top of wallet, right? And I think
Yes.
if you're talking about what's next, I do think we are about to see an explosion of people. I'd rather pay $5, $8, $10 to support a creator individually than another streaming service, or CNN Plus, or whatever it happens to be, to gain access to a mass medium. Even though it might feel like I get more quantity, you're going to choose quality, and I'd rather get an exclusive newsletter and an exclusive podcast from someone that I really enjoy listening to, and I'm willing to pay for that much more than I am willing to pay for something that gives me a lot, but I probably it's not the first thing I read when I see that newsletter,
Let me
in
ask
the
you a
morning.
question.
Yeah.
So like, is there, so in the writing world, that's Substack,
Yep.
right? So you have a certain amount of your top of heart,
Yep.
and then you can become top of wallet because you love this person and you're going to subscribe to the newsletter. Is there a Substack for podcasting?
So Substack does podcasting.
Okay.
You can
Oh,
distribute
interesting.
behind the paywall podcasts on Substack. Patreon has made a lot of efforts to get into the podcasting space to make it easier for both the creators and the listeners to get access to those exclusive podcasts. And I'm trying to think of, there are a number of other that have kind of stood. I mean, obviously, Apple and Spotify both have, there are premium podcasts that you can, that's why they kind of change the name, right? I follow a free podcast, I subscribe to a paid podcast. So there are some of those that are existing out there, and I think we'll only continue to see more, not only the technology getting better, but people mass
Makes sense.
adopting them. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, as I'm listening to you, I have neither a subscriber nor a follower, but I have binge lovers. I have people who get a hold of me and say, I've been binging on your podcast. And
Hmm.
I'm laughing. Get the stories. I just go one after another, and after another, and it inspires my day. And I go, wow. Well, and so it's not a subscriber, it's not a follower, but I'm satisfying an addiction. And who knew that you could binge on a podcast? But it's a very interesting moment to think through what you're saying, because you can begin to see the changes. So if you're a listener or a viewer today, the question for you is, where do you fit into this wonderful world that's emerging? And how do you begin to think about the purpose that you have, the significance you'd like, and maybe some profit at the same time? Because I have a hunch those with some profit are going to move in one direction, and those who are binge lovers are going to perhaps maybe move in maybe another. But I've never thought of the Substack as a vehicle. But these are interesting conversations. I'm watching our time, and I'm anxious to hear one last good thought about what your perspective of AI may or may not be in the world of podcasting, mostly
I'm
because,
so glad you brought that up.
because people have asked, is yours real or is it an AI produced one? And good, Mark, what are you thinking?
I mean, it's funny because yesterday I just published a part of my podcast episode was two voice synthesized AI bots having a conversation between each other, reviewing a new book that I wrote. And it was quite extraordinary because um, I mean, all I did was upload my book, and I said, okay, now do a review of this book. And they started out saying, oh well, Mark Schaefer, boy, this book is really in line with his other books. I mean, this is like there's no not. I'm thinking, what?
What?
And then there was another piece where I referred to this story at South by Southwest, and the synthesized podcast host says, I attended that event. And I'm going, what? Where are you going? It's like, and so, it'd be
You
interesting
didn't
to
see
hear,
the robot there. Go on, keep
you
going.
know,
It's
so I mean, there will be a day in the next 12 months probably where, you could have my voice synthesis, me, sounds like me, you know, it's informed
yeah.
by the millions of words of content I've put out on the web and the 13 years of podcasts and the videos and everything else and the books, having a conversation with some other voice synthesis thing. And, as I said, and Chad and I, agree on this that the heart of podcasting is this beauty of this trusted human voice, and I've listened to a few of these synthesized podcasts, and there's something compelling about it because you're listening to let's say a quote unquote, for the podcast people, I'm using air quotes here, quote unquote host that knows everything. It's AI. So Chad, is this going to be a niche product, or
Or a
is
dominant one.
or yeah, is it going to grow into something weird?
Um, I think it might actually be a mass adopted product for the right things, right? And so
Yeah.
I already, we adopted a new dog a few months ago. I walk him every morning. I have my AirPods in. I'm listening to a podcast, but undoubtedly while we're on our walk, I will get audio notifications from various news sources, and typically it is like the top three headlines of the day, reading it into my ear, right? I don't know why that, like, I should just be able to click play, and then I can get an AI generated, five
Newscast.
sentences on those three things. When I listened to your thing yesterday, Mark, what I texted you was, I think the people that have to worry are like morning show hosts, because that's what this sounded like, right? Very surface level. Someone read the book, they gave me three sentences about it, we kind of laugh and chuckle, we make the obvious joke, and then
Yeah,
we move on to the weather, right? And so
it's
if
coffee
I
chat.
can, yes. And so if you can teach an AI not only, hey, here's the top 20 news stories from overnight, I'm going to serve Chad the three that we think he's most interested in, and those are going to be different from Mark and from Andy. Like, I don't know why I wouldn't get that as the 8-minute podcast that I listen to in the morning, but that doesn't, that doesn't go deep, that doesn't establish a connection. Maybe there's a revenue vehicle there, but I think for some surface level stuff we will see that. On the flip side, I do think that there are the audio things are just going to get better. And so again, as you think about ways to augment your podcast, I think about, so like Scott Galloway, he has this umbrella podcast feed, right? He's got like multiple different types of shows, and so if you just like Scott, you can subscribe to all of them in one way. One of them is it basically takes his weekly op-ed email, and someone reads that and they publish it on Sunday. I don't think we're at the place now where I can get an AI voice to read that without you knowing that it's an AI voice. But fast forward a year from now, we might be pretty close. And so, voiceover actors or the people that he pays to kind of to read that, I think again we'll be able to get to that point where if AI can do that, it's not that I'm going to do less, it's what am I going to do instead of that now? And will I release one more episode a week, or will I interview someone different, right? Those are the types of things that I think about of on the AI front, is what does it free me up to do more of, not to do less.
I think the voice synthesis quality is there. I mean, my last audiobook was narrated by voice synthesis that sounded like me. It was indistinguishable. And so now it's just a matter of like integrating that into live conversations. And it
Yep.
seems like that's a very short leap.
Now add one dimension here, which we don't have time to talk about, but I don't want to lose. And I had a client in the video gaming industry, and we were talking about the metaverse. And I had lunch when I was working on that client, and my friend said, "Oh, my sister's in the dark web, and her husband has fallen in love with his avatar, wants to buy her a diamond." And now the whole question is, if we're going to be living in a surreal metaverse, where does all of this, I mean, think about our conversation. We love the people and the truth factor there. And then Mark puts his book up and he has two non-people discussing it. And now, if when you think about what's the next metaverse where we're going to be living surreal, and the size of that is huge. So, last thoughts? Go ahead, Chad. Yeah, I'm watching your face. You're telling me something.
No, yeah. I mean, I don't know that that's, I mean, I know I had friends, 15 years ago that were marrying people in World of Warcraft that they had never met in real life, right? But had built a relationship and that were married in real life and had kids, but they live this. So I think the difference now is back then you knew that there was another person at the other end of the computer, right? Now the question is that a person or is it a bot, right? And so I think that's the difference. I don't know that it's any different, than where we were 20, 30 years ago. And I think, and again, we don't have time for this. I think the biggest difference now is, right, this loneliness pandemic that we have and people only connecting through online means, right? And we've seen all kinds of headlines about the downfalls of that, the pitfalls. Lots of things can
And
happen.
Mark, your thoughts.
Well, I guess one of the things that Chad was sort of hinting at is the importance of trust.
Mhm.
Um, and I think to build a brand, whether you're talking about a company or a person, that you need to be transparent about these things and and build trust in all that you do. Steve Jobs famously said, "A brand is trust." That's the simplest way to to put it. And I think I'm encouraged that if I think about all the things I cherish most in my life, there's some human connection to it. It could be a writer that I love. It could be an artist that I love. It could be an artisan that I love. It could be some little, greeting card someone created for me or something, or a piece of furniture that real hands made. And so I think that's not going to change going forward. There will always be a place for the humanity, for the human touch, because that's what we cherish the most.
And if you haven't gone to Mark Schaefer's Uprising down in Knoxville and seen a group of 30 or so of people become human and humane to each other with joy, you should take a look at what Mark is offering. I'm going to ask both Mark and Chad just do a little pitch, short advertorial, and then we'll wrap up this lovely podcast today. And I think we should keep going and come back with a documentary a year from now. How true was our forecast? Mark, your last thought, please.
Well, thanks first of all for having me. You and I have talked on a podcast several times, and I would tell anybody you're one of the most delightful interviewers I've ever had. Always well prepared, always articulate, and really tuned into your guests. So thank you for that and the work you put into your show. I mean, the easy thing is you could find everything about me at businessesgrow.com. It's hard to spell Schaefer. You don't have to even remember. That's why I called it Businesses Grow, because I knew no one would be able to remember how to spell Schaefer. Um, so as Businesses Grow, my blog is there. It's free. My podcast is there. It's free. The Uprising event that Andy mentioned is probably the best thing I've done in my career. Chad's actually been there. I'm hoping he'll come in the spring. Yeah, but so businessesgrow.com, you can find out everything about me.
His newsletter, by the way, the recent one is terrific. And I read them with great, your blogs and your joy and your podcast. And so I'm a fan and a friend. Please, Chad, your last thought.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been great. It's fantastic meeting you. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with Mark. We've known each other for a number of years, and so excited that he introduced the two of us. You can find me. I'm at Adder Communications is my company and my website, ADER, or just look for Chad Parizman. I know all of the Parizmans in the world. We've only had the name for 3 generations, so if you look for that, you will definitely find me. I'm pretty much C Parizman on any website that I want to be found. So feel free to reach out that way if you want to talk about podcasts and the future and tools and how brands could be leveraging this fantastic medium in a better way.
Well, and as you know, I bring you on the brink with Andi Simon so you can get off the brink. And I have a hope that today if you're a podcaster, you've learned some new things about what's coming next and how to have your next season of joy. And if you're thinking about doing it, how to do it and not worry about your microphone. Or if you're listening to it, what is really going on there that has made you such a fan of 9 podcasts? And as you walk your dog in the morning, you listen maybe to mine or to Mark or to one that Chad has worked on. But it's always a pleasure to have you. The emails that come through come from across the globe, and I'm most appreciative. And if you guys have put me in the top 5% of all these 400 million, I can't thank you enough. I don't know what that means. Our books are all on Amazon. You can see them behind me. On the Brink was the first book about how a little anthropology can help your business grow. Rethink was about women smashing the myths of what women can do. And Women Mean Business is out just about a year now. And it has been selling just fantastic about how women are really meaning business. But I'm fascinated by what podcasting is and does. And I may start blogging along about it because I think there's something here bigger than a bear. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. And all of my guests, thank you for coming. Bye bye now and have a great day. Bye.